Welcome back to the Restoring Christian Culture podcast. I am Marco Salinas, co-hosting today with Mr. Dan Sevigny. Welcome, my friend.
Good afternoon.
Good to be back.
Amen.
Yes. These are always a lot of fun. This is always a blast when we get together and record and talk about the things that are important to us. So today's episode is no different, right? And you and I were talking, and we've got a big event coming up here at Sanctus Ranch Conference Center, which is the Invictus Men's Conference, second annual.
Very excited about it.
Very, very excited. And so you and I decided, hey, why not have an episode about Invictus? What is this conference about? How is it different from the other conferences that are out there? Because Catholic men conferences have really become a thing. Mm-hmm. They're all over the place now. I see them all over the country. A lot of times I do see a lot of the same speakers, just going to different places. And so we want to talk about what makes the Sanctus Ranch Invictus Men's Conference a little bit different. We want to talk about maybe some of our people that have come here last year's, as well as who's coming, right? And maybe do a little bit of a deep dive on what this is all about and what we're aiming for. What is the goal here? Because we have a very specific outreach. Obviously, it's a men's conference, right? But we would like to think that even though we're in the men's conference category, we're still doing things different.
Right.
Would you agree?
Absolutely.
So why don't we dive into that?
That'd be great. Let's begin as we always do in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Amen. All right. So let's start with this. Why did this start? You were the brainchild behind this Invictus Men's Conference. A little bit of background. I'll give this preface here before we, go into that. You have a long history in the Catholic space, putting on events, doing things. You were a youth administrator. You were a youth minister back home where you came from, which is in New Hampshire. You came down here. You're doing the same thing. You got involved in the retreat space. So you had the opportunity to see a lot of that, right? You got to see the interactions of, and I think a good portion of the retreats you were doing were men focused, right? So you definitely had your pulse on the feedback or the vibe or maybe the holes that are missing, right? The opportunities that are there, much like you did with, hey, you know what? I think that there's an opportunity to have a better retreat experience for Catholics or Christians. It doesn't really matter, but especially for Catholics, because the majority of the retreat centers are typically not, up to par as most people would expect. So you did something similar. You were aware, you were watching, you were listening. People come to you and they say, this was great, but here's maybe what's lacking. And so you said, I think we can do something. Now you have actual men's retreats here that are very men focused. This is a men's conference. What's the difference between that and then where did the whole idea of the Invictus Men's Conference come from?
Yeah, it's all good questions. I was very blessed. I've been able to be involved in a lot of things, as you mentioned. I was actually reflecting, they're doing a Boston Men's Conference, again, after a number of years that hasn't been in force. And I was involved in one of those years of planning for the Boston Men's Conference. These are the conferences we're bringing in, the Jim Caviezel's, the Father Carapis at the time, and other things like that. And so I've had a lot of those experiences with men's conferences. There are things that I absolutely love and that guys love. And then there's other pieces that you go, wonder why we do it that way. After a number of years, you start to go down your journey of faith. You probably advance a little bit. A men's conference is interesting because we're bringing in probably teenagers as well as young adults. And then you get guys that are newly married. You get the warriors that have all the family and they're dealing with those challenges. And then you get the guys that have retired. They got grandparents now, things of that nature. So everybody's looking for a little bit of a different thing. But what's awesome about a men's conference is very often we're able to come together and mesh pretty quickly. So one of the things that I notice in men's conferences is very often we would bring in a speaker. There might be a little bit of hype, a little excitement in it. But in the not so distant past, the men's conferences I would go to, they were just fluffy. They were like, oh, it's great. And, Jesus loves you. Some guy would get up and, give his testimony, which was great. And it met some people where they were. But, there are a lot of guys that would come to me and they're like, I want to be set on fire. I want to be challenged. Men, we like to be, those warriors if we can be. And we've always got something to battle in our life. So we need to be given that. So when we were looking at a men's conference, we said, hey, how do we do that? How do we bring that in? So one of the things that other people would say about a conference is very often it was so big that you didn't get to know anybody, or you felt like, gosh, I can't go to a men's conference. I don't have 20 guys that I'm going with. I'm going to feel all alone. Yeah. And so I think that these smaller men's conferences at times really have a tremendous benefit, because not only do we get great speakers, a great talk, but we get that fellowship component that I think is missing so much in our world today, especially the post-COVID world, when we've been told to just isolate ourselves. This is an opportunity to get away from that.
I like that. Yeah. Maybe I can touch on this. I went to the last one, right? And let's just start with this. Last year it was Jesse Romero.
Yes, Jason Jones as well.
We had Jason Jones, but although he asked to be off record because he was dropping all kinds of nuclear bombs.
That's okay.
Which I think made it so much better, by the way.
He just asked not to be videoed.
That's right. And so that was really cool. And I can say that I saw people in the room. Jesse Romero brings the fire. He brings the heat. Somehow or another, though, Jason Jones really also left people, even Jesse himself said, that was a phenomenal talk, Jason. Yep. And so that was like, we were all kind of blown away by that. And he's a lower key guy. He's not the guy that you see going around and doing all the men's conferences all over the United States. You know what I mean? And so that was kind of cool.
That's right.
And so one of the features or benefits, so to speak, of having them here is I think you've been good about going after some of the people that are not necessarily the highest level guys or the most well-known, let's call them Catholic speakers, celebrities, so to speak. But maybe some of the superstars that are a little bit on the lower key side, maybe they're in a more of a niche category, so to speak, for lack of a better term, which I think is part of who's coming for this year, which we'll talk about. But yeah, last year, Jesse brought all kinds of fire, and there was a 3-part talk that he gave. And the first one was, as he called it, a gut punch. Jesse Romero used to be a boxer, so he likes to do a lot of these boxer type analogies and things like that. But boy, was that an accurate statement.
And I think it's what guys need to hear. We want to hear.
We do. We really, really do. This was not the retreat for fluff, for fluffiness. Absolutely not. It was the antithesis too, which was kind of cool because again, maybe there is a time and a place for certain overly emotional things, what have you. But as a general rule, we are trying not to go too far in that category as men. We want to be a little more stabilized, and we want to be a little more strong emotionally for our wives and for our kids and things like that. There is a time and a place for it, but we're not getting enough of the stronger warrior stuff, I think. In my humble opinion, my friends that came out here, they say the same thing.
Right.
There's a sentiment there that is common amongst a lot of the men that are in this Catholic circle that are trying to go a little bit more old school. We want to be more traditional. We do favor the things of the past, the way that things used to be. Because one of the things that we are really bothered with is the overall effeminacy of the culture of the time. But here's the kicker, Dan. Here's the worst part. It has 100% spread into the church.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's going to probably need to be its own episode.
It might be.
Right? So let's get you on the camera there toasting your very nicely.
Get rolling.
So, so Jesse really brought us that vibe, that atmosphere that we as men were really looking for. And he brought exactly, I think, what we wanted, and I think what you wanted as the facilitator of this event. What are your thoughts on last year's event?
Yeah, I think that in general, you're hitting exactly what we were looking for. We were looking for an event that we were able to be distinctly masculine about. Give us that. Our world today, I think lots of times we're just blurring everything. You can look at all of the chaotic of different movements on the sexual side and things like that. Everybody wants to blend everybody. Well, I got to be honest with you. I have a wife, and I want my wife to be feminine. I want my wife to be the one that is the nurturer. I'm going through something right now with a family member that's actually at a hospital as we're making this podcast. My wife needs to be there. I don't necessarily need to be there, I need to do the next thing that men need to do. We need to protect. We need to provide. We've got to be that strong person that is able to make the tough and hard calls. And I think what we have is in our church, we've even effeminized everything. Men that are active in their parishes very often are asked to just be like the women praying. All of these things are wonderful, but if we truly take the roles that are God-given, we will do far better. So in these men's conferences, what we're looking for, and Jesse crushed it. He came out and he's like, dude, you guys are a bunch of wimps, I think he's called us. And he's right. We
That's
are
right.
wimps. We're failing on a global scale right now as men. And so if there's men that are watching or listening right now, you and I know that. We know that we've got to step it up. Now, it doesn't mean that you got to be a jerk. It means that we need to be fed. We need to be around other men that are going through the journey, that are saying, hey, stop wimping out, just be a man.
Yeah.
Be the man that God called you to be. And so even as we put this together, we used Ephesians 6:13,
Yeah.
where it's talking about take up the full armor of God.
Amen.
So that we can be ready. That's what we have to be, because the devil's coming to our doorstep all the time.
Right.
And you know what? We as men in our culture today, we're just going, oh, he's here. Oh, well, what do I do now? Well, that's not how a warrior would prepare for the enemy.
That's right.
We need to prepare.
Yeah, so as Catholic men, as fathers, as husbands, as leaders of our homes and our communities and all of these things, right? There's not a lot of room in this culture any longer for this kind of lukewarm, passive type of a mindset when it comes to leading our family to the gate, to the golden gates of heaven, so to speak. Why? Because Satan is like a prowling lion, right? And boy, I mean, you'll probably agree with me on this, Dan, but we can see that so manifest everywhere. It used to be that Satan was very low key about that. Not anymore, right? Not anymore. Not in our times that we're living in today. It's very wide open. It's very clear. And the scariest part of all is that I see so many people going along with it like there's nothing wrong, including, again, within the church.
Absolutely.
So we've got a colossal problem. We've got a crisis. And I really don't think people have this attitude, well, we'll just leave it to the priests to fix that. We'll leave it to the bishops.
No, we have our domestic church.
Correct.
And our domestic church needs our help. And then that way, once we get our domestic church in order, we can then begin to help the church get better. And really, what do we need as men? We need the tools. We need to be challenged. We need to also understand fellowship. So again, going back to, these smaller men's conferences, one of the things that we've been able to achieve with Invictus is men just need to break bread together. We need to have a cigar together. Those are important things. And you need to have a place where you as a man can bring that friend that you know is like right there. They're ready to kind of take this whole faith process a little serious, a little more serious than they have. That's where we want to be able to say, hey, buddy, come join me. Come to this conference. Get fed, get energized, and move forward. And I hope that's what we're accomplishing here with the Invictus Conference. And I'm excited that, in this second year, now we're able to go even further, take guys further down the journey, spread a wider net to bring people back to the faith.
All right. So on to phase 2. This is year number 2. Let's talk a little about an introduction to our speaker. And matter of fact, we have a couple of speakers, right?
We do. We're very excited.
But let's start with our headliner, Mr. Kennedy Hall. What was your reasoning, Dan, for going after him specifically and requesting that he come? I think you had read a few of his books, right?
Yes. Yeah, he has a
Elaborate
great
on
book
that.
out there, and it was basically Terror of Demons, and there were so many great chapters in this book that Kennedy put together that really spoke to me as a man. It was cutting through all the fluff. I could be honest with you. If I'm going to go to a men's conference, I want you to just talk to me like a dude, and Kennedy did that in that book. I also started to listen to some of his podcasts, and I'm like, it's straightforward. It's right there. He's got a great beard, so that was attractive too. Cigars, whiskey,
Right up our alley.
like the whole package, Yep. But I was very excited. I got a chance to meet Kennedy. We spoke at another conference. I love the way that he was just a straight shooter in the faith. He's a very traditional guy. He's extraordinarily articulate. And recently, I was very blessed to have helped a priest friend of mine out. He needed somebody to go to a conference, and I was able to do that for him. And so I went to Kennedy's conference that they do up in Canada, and got to experience how they put together a men's conference. Was very impressed with what they did. We already knew that Kennedy was coming down here, but he's just one of those guys that I think he's going to be able to cut through all of that murkiness and get real solid about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. You had somebody that was here. I don't remember who it was, but I remember them speaking, and they were reading from Kennedy Hall's book. Mm-hmm. And that was actually my introduction to it. And I remember sitting there thinking, man, I need to get my hands on this book. This stuff is really, really on point.
Yeah.
And then it turned out that it was Kennedy Hall.
Yeah.
Now, Kennedy Hall's a younger guy.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he's advanced in his wisdom for his age. So some people are given that great gift, and he's most certainly is one of them. To have already put 5 books together, and the guy's in his, I think, early 30s. So it's, pretty impressive. I'm impressed, But the information that's in it, he's sharing things that are like, this is probably something that would be written by a guy that was like 90,
that
had a whole lot of life experience and wisdom and knowledge and things. But obviously the Spirit has enlightened him very much so. Yeah. So, okay. So the guy has a phenomenal track record, a bunch of amazing books. I've listened to his podcast a few times. Really good stuff. He's on with a lot of the other people that are more on the traditional side. He does a lot of, podcast episodes with those folks. They're always talking about the issues of our times and of our days, the things that we're dealing with here. I like his quote here: "Effeminacy is a plague, and it must be eradicated." So that goes back to a lot of what we've already been talking about. But I like the fact that that's kind of his main thing.
Absolutely. And I think when he speaks about this, it's true, it's authentic, it's not coming over with this incredible bravado, it's not the machismo version. It's simply saying we have our role. And that's what we need to get back to. We have our role in our marriages, in our families, in the public square. We've got our role in the church too.
Yeah.
And if we do that, the church will be better for it. Our families will be better for it. And I think he's the exact right speaker to come in and to talk about those things. He's also great because he talks about where God needs to be in the public square. And I think there's a lot of people that resonates with. We're seeing possibly some things on a resurgence right now in our country.
Sure.
But it's been crazy. You see what goes on with these people that now want to have satanic masses and other things at capitals. Our world is being attacked. And so to bring in a guy like Kennedy Hall to just cut through that, I think is going to be real exciting. And I think it's going to be great.
And here's my thing. That word plague, that's a heavy word, right? I think plague, I think COVID. Mm-hmm. Look at the impact and the effect of something like that. It spread throughout the entire world. There really wasn't a place that wasn't affected by it, right? That's what a plague looks like. And not only that, but a plague is deadly, right? What has this effeminacy attack, which is obviously extremely satanic, what kind of outcome has this produced for us as a culture, as a society, right? I mean, it has put to death men's masculinity. Mm-hmm. And when you put to death men's masculinity, then usually the woman takes over. She's like, well, you're not doing your part.
Right.
So I guess now I have to step up. And that's not the order that God created, is it?
That's right.
Right. So, yeah, I think you're on point with your selection. I think he's great. Do we want to talk about some of our sub-speakers?
Absolutely. We're excited. I'm going to give a little talk. So if anybody likes this, you can come and hear that. If you don't like it, it's a great time to go get coffee. And then we're very blessed. Nick Cavazos is also going to join us. And he has a great podcast out there. And actually recently, if you go Google it right now, you'll see a podcast between Kennedy and Nick. I did not realize that they were friends. Nick's a little bit more local, but he's a young man going to speak to the young guys. Super, super intelligent, has a great way of articulating very, very complex concepts about the faith. And you're just like, Oh, well, I wish I had thought about it that way. So I think Nick's going to be fantastic as well. We're very excited to have him. And I'm thrilled to announce that Father Purdy, who is the prior of the SSPX in Dickinson, Texas, he's going to be coming out and he'll also be speaking with us. Wow. And I think he's got some very interesting topics that he's planning to share with the men because let's be honest, our priests very often, they get to hear it all. They get to hear it from the ladies' side. They get to hear it from the men's side.
Right.
He knows what we're struggling with. So this will be his first time out and we're excited to have him as well.
That's fantastic. Where is the venue? Where is the location taking place for this event?
This is another great reason. We used to go to talking before about some other men's conferences. Very often they were so large you had to have them in a conference center or in a big gym in a high school or something like that. There were all kinds of guys. And, you'd have a great event, but then you get some sort of crappy box lunch that no guy wanted to eat. There was no place to sit. There certainly were no cigars like we're enjoying right now. There was no beverages. And so we're going to have this here again at Sanctus Ranch. We're very excited about that. We'll have the conference times, but we are planning a huge barbecue dinner. So there's going to be brisket, there's going to be chicken, there's going to be sausage. We're not making a female meal. So come on, boys, come on out, have a good time. But we're going to be able to break bread together. We're going to be able to have a cigar. We're going to be able to enjoy the property. We're going to be able to enjoy some time in the chapel, have mass. So we've kind of got all of those pieces in this. So if you're a guy that wants to grab a cigar, grab a beverage, come out, get recharged for a conference, but then also have the opportunity to sit around and talk afterwards and have a chance to break open what hit you that day, so that you can actually make some commitments. Hey, this is what I'm going to do. We're still in the Lenten season. It's a great opportunity as men to go, okay, again, how do I strip away the old and put on the new that Christ has intended for us? So I hope that'll be one of the great benefits from the event as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I have to give a quick plug. The person who is in charge of and managing the food around here happens to be your wife. She does not take that task or duty lightly. I think I've come to every single men-related event that you guys have had here. The food never, ever, ever disappoints. It's one of my favorite highlights of the joint. And so I love the spiritual nourishment, but I still love the material as well.
Amen. She's got some great helpers in Carlos and a couple other guys that are going to hit the smoker. So one of the things that's going to be great about this conference too is you're literally going to walk up to the door smelling a smoker. Right. Does it get any better than that?
Does it get any more Texas than that too,
Exactly.
by the way? Yeah, absolutely. Makes me feel right at home here. So yes, so we've got $80 general admission.
Yep.
That includes breakfast tacos. So if you thought that it was just an amazing lunch, you're wrong. You also get breakfast tacos and coffee and what have you to start out, and then it leads up to that amazing Texas Hill Country barbecue lunch, courtesy again of one of our good friends here, Mr. Carlos, who makes phenomenal barbecue.
Absolutely.
There's also an additional event though.
Yeah,
and I think that's a big deal.
I think it is too. Very often guys will say, "Hey, if you're bringing in a speaker, how do we get to the private VIP opportunity? I want to know something." And so what we did is I got a chance to visit with Kennedy, and I said, "Hey, how would you feel about doing a Friday night event? We can bring guys in again. We can have an event where we have kind of an elevated." Fish fry, if you would. It's still Lent, though. We're going to keep it a little tame.
That's right.
But we're also going to have some cigars that have been donated for the event. A couple of folks have brought some bottles that have been donated. And we're going to have basically a fireside chat. So we call it Fish, Friends, and Fireside Chat, where Kennedy's going to speak with us. So it's a great opportunity to just decompress and have that lower energy event, sometimes that are the most powerful.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I'm excited about that event for sure. I'm noticing also there's a post-conference fellowship with BYOB, BYOC. We all know as men what BYOC is.
Yes.
This is part of our incense here to the heavens that we're sharing. So that's a part of it as well as the post-conference event.
Absolutely.
Now, let's zoom out just a little bit here, though, as part of this. What is this idea behind the conference as part of the Restoring Christian Culture initiative?
Well, I think if we were going to restore a Christian culture, we have to look to the family. That's the first place that's being attacked and being destroyed. And if we look to the family, this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about men's conferences and the retreats we're doing, the platoon meetings we have out here. We have to go to the men. For a long time, you mentioned it, Marco, very often the women have to lead because we're just skipping it. You know, whether it be the way we've designed our work life or whether it be the choices we're making or the men need to go out and do fun things. Men need fellowship, but we also have to be leaders. And so if we're going to restore a Christian culture, we're going to do that by restoring the family. And if men understand their role, it'll be far easier for the ladies to adapt to their role and the kids to find something that works. You know, we know that there's tons of studies out there that the difference in the child and what they do later on in life comes down to the dad.
Big time.
And, you know, if that's not our situation, we didn't have a great dad or we, you know, didn't have a dad at all or he walked away or whatever. We know how challenging that is, but we want to stop that and get the men fired up, get them right, and build that Christian culture in our families, and then it can spread to the world.
For sure. I'll just throw in a quick note. I think others have probably seen this as something that's been circulating on social media. Recently, we had the death of a great actor, Gene Hackman. This was the guy that played the enemy to Superman, right? When I was growing up, loved that show in the 80s. That was one of my favorite movies. And Lex Luger is just, you know, we hated him, right? And so I saw this video clip of him now that surfaced after his death where someone's interviewing him and he's discussing the fact that his father left when he was like 5-6 years old. And the guy is in his 60s at this point and he gets completely choked up. He can hardly even express himself, right? So the father wound is just so significant.
Yeah.
Not having dad there, dad being weak, dad being a horrible example of all of those things. I think we can agree, Dan, that this is probably the primary reason why the world is the way the world is.
Yeah.
We are not talking about a light subject here.
We're not.
We're talking about what an unbelievable important role that we as men have as fathers, as husbands, to lead. We literally have the ability to change the world.
I would agree.
So this conference is not just, hey, come and hear a great talk and eat some great barbecue. It's really a lot deeper than that.
I totally agree.
We have the opportunity to get re-engaged, recharged, fired up, and then go back home and hopefully do something, right? And so this is I'm just trying to kind of tie this in with this concept of the Restoring Christian Culture Initiative, because these are your higher, bigger picture goals as part of this nonprofit.
That's right.
And everything you're doing is for the family, but let's be honest. Really, the focus is it needs to start with the man.
That's right.
Right.
And one of the things I'm excited about with this conference too, and we encourage every year, if there's a dad that's listening, bring your son. Whether that's an adult son with his own family, whether that's actually bringing your own dad to the conference, or whether it's bringing your teenage sons. If you go to the registration, you'll be able to see there's a family option. Bring the boys. Boys need to see their dads stepping up. They need to see their dads praying masculinely. They need to see their dads shaking their head yes when somebody says something that really hits them.
That's right.
Because we need, for our daughters, we need men for them to choose as spouses, and that starts very early on.
Big time, big time. Real men seeking holiness. This is kind of your emphasis of this, as well as growing in masculinity and traditional Catholicism. So the Invictus Men's Retreat is going to check off all of those boxes.
It is.
If you haven't figured it out by now, you need to be here. So give us another recap on the date, if you would, Dan, of the event.
This is coming up. We're only about a week and a half away. It's March 29th. That's the Saturday. If you can make it out for the Friday night fish fry, the fireside chat, that's on the 28th. But registration is still open. We're still accepting that. We do need to get that in as quick as possible. You don't want to miss this. And sometimes guys will say to me, it's a whole Saturday. How do I take a whole Saturday? If there are ladies that are listening to this podcast, push them out the door. Get him to take a Saturday to focus on who he is, his masculinity, to be recharged, because he'll come back a much better man.
That's right. And it's like, did you not hear what we just talked about on the Restoring Christian Culture podcast? the significance of this role, you can't afford to not miss this Saturday. What were you going to do anyways? Tinker around in your shed, polish your vehicle, or go do something overly leisurely? You're going to go and do something overly leisurely when this retreat is happening in your neck of the woods, in your area? Talk about dropping the ball.
Absolutely.
So yes, I'm giving you some heavy dose of Catholic guilt.
Yes. And just so you know, there's guys that are local that are like, I'm not really sure. We have guys that are flying in for this event. We get guys that are driving 4 and 5 hours to come out to this event. If you're listening to this podcast and you're like, well, gosh, I'm 5 hours away, there's an opportunity to stay at the lodge here at Sanctus Ranch. We're blessed to have those facilities. So that's available if you go to the website as well. So check that out and make sure that you take this opportunity and get to a conference, get fired up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So $80 for the event, $50 if you want to come and hang out with Kennedy Hall. That includes your fish fry, your cigar that's donated, your drink that's donated, and of course the fellowship, which is priceless. If you want to spend the night, that's a separate cost because accommodations for lodging are not free. So, and this is still a nonprofit, by the way. So it'd be really nice if you would have a generous heart in understanding that everything that you're putting together here is basically designed to kind of cover costs. The $80 entrance fee is really not much. And we've got people to pay that come here as well as running this whole entire place. And then same thing with the overnight, with the Friday night thing. So just keep that in mind. Those are all separate costs. You're going to spend a little bit more to spend the night, but it's a beautiful place. It's up there in the accommodations level with any other nice hotel that you could stay at, but you're here on holy grounds and you're at a great place and you just walk right over here and have a great time.
Absolutely. And I will make a little plug. There have been some of the ladies that have said, gosh, we love listening to Kennedy too. What about us? What about us? So here's the deal. I did reach out to him and I said, Kennedy, would you be willing to speak to the ladies on Sunday? And he said, yeah, because he's spending the night. He'll be here. So if anybody wants to join us out for Mass on Sunday, you can come to the Mass that's for the conference to be at 11 a.m. On Sunday. And ladies, Kennedy's agreed to speak to you. I would just say bring your tissues and get ready.
Wow. What a generous guy. That is incredible. Well, so what's the best way for people to go about doing this? We'll obviously put the link right here in the show notes, both on YouTube or, where all the other podcast channels that you might be following.
Yes.
But ultimately go to the website. What's the direct link for that, Dan?
So they can go to sanctusranch.com/Invictus.
/Invictus. All right. And we have a sort of a conference coordinator, which is Mr. John Garcia, one of our diehard helpers.
Absolutely.
And one of those that are always there when we call upon him and when we need him.
Amen.
And so Mr. John Garcia is also available to reach out to if you have any questions and what have you. We'll make sure his information's on there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hope to see you guys. I think it's going to be a great event, and I'm glad we spent a little time talking about it today.
Excellent. Well, if you're good with it, I think that's a wrap.
Amen.
All right. That does it for another episode of the Restoring Christian Culture podcast. See you here next time. God bless.
God bless you.